The compass needle spun wildly, trembling like a trapped insect. Sergeant William Chen stared at it, tapped the glass, shook it gently. The needle ignored north. Instead, it swung hard left, pointing toward a stretch of empty Vietnamese jungle that intelligence had cleared 3 times. No structures. No enemy activity. Nothing. But the needle didn't waver. It pointed with absolute certainty at something his eyes couldn't see. It was October 1967. The war in Vietnam had been grinding through its 3rd year of American escalation. Cu Chi District, 20 miles northwest of Saigon, had become a nightmare for U.S. forces. Entire companies would sweep an area, declare it clear, and return a week later to find freshly dug bunkers and enemy troops appearing from nowhere. Ambushes came from impossible angles. Supply caches vanished overnight. The Viet Cong moved through the jungle like ghosts, attacking and disappearing before anyone could respond. Command was frustrated. Soldiers were dying, and no one could figure out how the enemy was doing it. William Chen was 26 years old, Chinese-American from San Francisco, engineering degree from Berkeley, drafted in 1966, assigned to the 25th Infantry Division as a combat engineer. His job was practical: detect mines, clear obstacles, assess structural integrity of bridges and buildings. He was good at it, methodical, patient, the kind of soldier who noticed details others missed. And on this particular morning, during a routine patrol outside the village of Phu Mai Hung, he noticed his compass was broken, or at least that's what he thought at first. The patrol was standard: 12 men moving through elephant grass and scattered palms, checking grid coordinates, looking for signs of enemy movement. Hot, humid, the air thick enough to chew. They'd been walking since dawn, finding nothing. The village ahead was supposedly friendly. South Vietnamese civilians. No VC presence. Intelligence had verified it twice. The patrol was pure procedure, the kind of mission where you stayed alert but didn't expect contact. Chung was walking point with a lieutenant when he checked his compass to confirm bearing. That's when he saw the needle spinning. He stopped, tapped it. The needle steadied, but pointing west, not north. He rotated his body. The needle followed, always pointing in the same absolute direction regardless of how he turned. That wasn't malfunction. That was magnetic interference. "Sir," Chen said quietly, "something's wrong with my compass." The lieutenant glanced over. Young, 23, West Point grad, 3 months in country. Broken? Maybe. Or it's picking up metal. A lot of it. Where's it pointing? Chen extended his arm, following the needle's direction. It aimed toward a section of jungle approximately 200 meters west. Thick vegetation. No visible structures. He pulled out his map, checked coordinates. According to intelligence reports, that area had been swept twice in the past month. Clean. Empty. Nothing there. Could be shrapnel, the lieutenant said. Old ordnance. We've bombed this area before. Could be, Chen agreed, but something felt wrong. Shrapnel was scattered, random. This felt concentrated, deliberate. The needle wasn't wavering or confused. It was pointing at something specific with absolute confidence. They continued the patrol, checked the village. Friendly faces, children playing, women working in rice paddies. No signs of VC activity. Standard procedures had filed a report, marked the area clear, move on. But Chen couldn't stop thinking about the compass. That night, back at base camp, he checked it again. In his tent, away from any metal structures, the needle pointed north perfectly, functioning normally. No malfunction. The next morning, he requested permission to investigate the area his compass had indicated. The request went to the company commander, a captain from Texas with 6 months left on his tour. Tired, skeptical. He'd heard 100 theories about how to find a VC, and none of them worked. "Your compass pointed at jungle," the captain said flatly. "Yes, sir, but the magnetic deviation was significant. That indicates concentrated metal. Could be a weapons cache. Could be nothing. Could be scrap. Could be your compass is broken." "I tested it, sir. It works fine everywhere else." Only that specific location causes deviation. The captain studied him, saw a careful, serious soldier, not prone to drama or wild theories. You're saying there's something buried there? Yes, sir. Something large, made of metal. Intelligence cleared that area twice. I know, sir. If I send a squad out there and you're wrong, that's a day wasted. Resources wasted. Men exposed for nothing. Chen said nothing. Just waited. The captain sighed, rubbed his face. Fine. Take a fire team. For men, you get 2 hours. If you don't find anything, we're done with compass hunting. Clear. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The next afternoon, Chen led 3 soldiers back to the area. He carried his compass like a divining rod, following the needle's pull. The other soldiers thought he was insane. One of them, a private from Ohio, said it out loud. We're following a broken compass into the jungle looking for invisible metal. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. It's not broken, Chen said quietly. It's working perfectly. It's just pointing at something that isn't north. They pushed through dense vegetation. The compass needle grew more agitated, spinning faster, pulling harder. Chen felt his heart rate increase. Something was here. Something big. They were close. 50 meters. 25. 10. And then Chen stopped, looked down, saw nothing but jungle floor. Leaves, roots, dirt. But his compass was going wild, the needle spinning in full circles, completely overwhelmed by whatever was beneath his feet. Here, Chen said. Right here. The private from Ohio looked around. There's nothing here, Sarge. Chen knelt, brushed away leaves, felt the ground. Solid, but something about it felt wrong. Too solid, too flat. He pulled his bayonet, probed the dirt. 6 inches down, the blade hit something hard, metallic. He scraped away more soil, revealed a shape, rectangular, rusted steel, a hatch. The soldiers stared. Nobody spoke. Chen kept digging, clearing the edges. The hatch was 2 feet by 3 feet, partially buried, camouflaged perfectly. He found the handle, pulled. It didn't budge. He pulled harder. Something clicked. The hatch lifted an inch. Cool air rushed out, air that smelled of earth and darkness and human occupation. Chen looked at his team. Get the lieutenant. Now. Within an hour, the area was swarming with soldiers. The company commander arrived. Engineers. Demolition experts. Medical personnel standing by. Radio operators calling back to battalion headquarters. Everyone staring at the hatch that wasn't supposed to exist in jungle that intelligence had cleared as empty. Chen stood to the side, still holding his compass, watching officers debate what to do next. The compass had stopped spinning. Now it simply pointed downward, toward whatever lay beneath them. The captain pulled Chen aside. How did you know? I didn't know, sir. I just followed the compass. It was pointing at concentrated metal. I thought maybe a cache. Buried weapons. Didn't expect this. A hatch means structure. Structure means tunnels. You know what this means. Chen nodded. It meant they'd been walking over enemy positions for months without knowing. It meant the VC weren't vanishing into jungle. They were vanishing underground. It meant every cleared area might be hiding networks of tunnels filled with soldiers and supplies. It meant the entire tactical situation was wrong. The captain made a decision. We're going in. I need volunteers. Small men. Anyone claustrophobic stays topside. 6 soldiers stepped forward. Chen was one of them. The captain looked at him. You found it. You don't have to go down. Yes, sir, I do. Why? Chen didn't have a good answer. Something about needing to see. Needing to know if his compass had really led him to something that mattered. Because I want to know what's down there, sir. The captain nodded. Weapons tight. Flashlights only when necessary. If you encounter enemy, retreat immediately. Do not engage underground. These are their tunnels. They know them. You don't. Understood. Yes, sir. They opened the hatch fully. A ladder descended into darkness. The first soldier, a specialist named Torres, climbed down slowly, pistol in one hand, flashlight in the other. He reached the bottom. His voice came a hollow, muffled by earth. Tunnel. Heads west. Maybe 3 feet high. I can't stand up. One by one, they descended. Chen went third. When his feet hit the tunnel floor, the darkness was absolute. He clicked on his flashlight. The beam revealed hard-packed earth walls, wooden support beams, a ceiling so low he had to crouch. The air was cool, stale, smelling of soil and something else. Cooking oil, fish sauce, human habitation. They moved forward in single file. The tunnel was narrow, barely shoulder width. Every few meters, support beams held back the earth. The construction was sophisticated, deliberate. This wasn't hastily dug. This was engineered, planned, built over time with skill and care. Chen recognized the signs. Proper load distribution, reinforced corners, drainage channels carved into the floor to prevent flooding. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. 50 meters in, the tunnel branched. Left and right. Torres stopped. Which way? Chen pulled out his compass. Underground. In darkness. Probably pointless. But he checked anyway. The needle swung right. He didn't know if that meant anything, but he said, right? They took the right branch. Another 30 meters. Then the tunnel opened into a chamber. Small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet. Ceiling high enough to stand. Torres's flashlight revealed supplies. Rice sacks, ammunition crates, medical supplies, canteens, sleeping mats. This was a supply depot, a staging area, and it was recent. The rice was fresh, the supplies organized. People had been here days ago, maybe hours ago. Jesus, Torres whispered, this is an entire base. They moved deeper, found more chambers, some for storage, some for sleeping, mats on the ground, personal items, photographs on earthen walls, some for cooking, small stoves, pots, food preparation areas. One chamber had a table and maps, command post. Another had medical supplies organized like a field hospital. The tunnels went on, branching, connecting, creating a labyrinth beneath the jungle. Chen's mind was racing. This wasn't just a tunnel. This was a city, an underground city. Complete infrastructure, living quarters, supply storage, command structure, medical facilities. And if this existed here, it existed everywhere. The entire region could be honeycombed with tunnels. The VC weren't in the jungle. They were beneath it. They'd been underground for 40 minutes when Torres found the other entrance. Another ladder, leading up to another hidden hatch. He climbed carefully, listened, pushed it open a crack. Daylight streamed in. He looked around. We're 200 meters from where we started, he said quietly, on the other side of the village. They'd walked under friendly village, under civilians and rice paddies and children playing, under everything, and no one above had any idea. They retreated back through the tunnels, marking intersections with chalk, counting chambers, noting supplies. When they emerged from the original hatch, Chen felt like he was surfacing from deep water. The jungle seemed impossibly bright, the air impossibly fresh, the world above suddenly fragile, a thin skin over something vast and hidden. The captain was waiting. Report. Torres answered. Extensive tunnel network, sir. Multiple chambers. Supplies. Command post. Medical station. Living quarters. At least 2 entrances we found. Probably more. This isn't a hiding spot. It's a base. A whole damn base underground. The captain's face went pale. He looked at Chun. Your compass led us to this. Yes, sir. How much metal down there? Support beams. Some steel reinforcement. Ammunition. But not enough to explain the magnetic deviation. There must be something else. Something larger. The captain turned to his radio operator. Get battalion on the line. Tell them we found tunnels. Extensive. Occupied recently. We need engineers. We need tunnel rats. We need command to see this. He paused. And tell them intelligence was wrong. Very wrong. Over the next 3 days, more teams went into the tunnels. They discovered the network extended over 3 square miles. More than 40 chambers. Storage for months of supplies. hospitals with surgical equipment, printing presses for propaganda, conference rooms, sleeping quarters for hundreds, wells for water, ventilation systems that brought fresh air from hidden vents in a jungle. The tunnels even had trapdoors and false walls to hide sections if they were compromised. The engineering was remarkable, the commitment staggering, and Chen's compass kept pointing deeper, kept insisting there was something more, something the teams hadn't found yet. Command sent specialists, tunnel rats, small, wiry soldiers trained for underground warfare, engineers with detection equipment, intelligence officers who couldn't believe what they were seeing. The tunnel network at Siuchi wasn't just remarkable, it was impossible. Or it should have been, but it existed, and William Chen's malfunctioning compass had found it, except the compass wasn't malfunctioning. That became clear when engineers brought their own detection equipment underground, metal detectors, magnetometers, sophisticated instruments that measured magnetic field disturbances. And all of them agreed there was a massive metal concentration somewhere in the tunnel network, something large. Something Chen's simple compass had detected from 200 meters away through solid earth. Could be a vehicle, one engineer suggested. Buried tank or truck. The VC sometimes hide equipment underground. Could be ordnance, another said. Unexploded bomb. Big one. 500-pounder could create this kind of signature. But Chen didn't think so. Ordnance would be avoided, not built around. And a vehicle would have been removed or salvaged. Whatever was creating the magnetic field was intentional, meant to be there. He studied the tunnel maps they'd drawn, crude sketches showing the network's layout. The magnetic readings were strongest in the northeastern section, an area they hadn't fully explored yet, because the tunnels there were partially collapsed. That's where it is, Chen said, pointing. Whatever's causing the interference. It's there. The captain, now overseeing what had become a major operation, looked at the map. Those tunnels are unstable. Engineering says they could collapse completely. But there's something there, sir, something important. Important enough to risk men? Chen hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. The VC built this entire network, reinforced miles of tunnels, created a whole underground base. They wouldn't do that randomly. They'd do it to protect something, or hide something. Whatever's generating this magnetic signature might be why this network exists. The captain considered. Finally, you're going down again. Take 2 tunnel rats. Careful. If it looks unstable, you retreat. No heroics. Clear. Yes, sir. The next morning, Chen descended into the tunnels with 2 specialists. Rodriguez, a tunnel rat from Texas, and Kowalski, an engineer from Michigan. Both men were small, experienced, comfortable in the claustrophobic darkness. They carried pistols, flashlights, and detection equipment. Chen carried his compass. They moved through the network, past the chambers they'd already mapped, into the northeastern section. The tunnels here were rougher, less finished. The support beams were older, some rotting. The ceiling sagged in places. Water seeped through cracks. Rodriguez moved carefully, testing each step. This section's older, Kowalski whispered. Original network. The other tunnels were built later, expanding from this core. They reached a collapse. Earth and broken support beams blocking the tunnel. But there was a gap at the top. Rodriguez shined his light through. Continues on the other side. Maybe 10 meters of collapse. Gap's tight. Chen checked his compass. The needle was pulling forward, through the collapse, toward whatever lay beyond. We need to get through. Dangerous, Rodriguez said. Whole thing could come down. I know, but we're close. They squeezed through the gap one at a time. Chen went first, pressing himself flat, wiggling through loose earth that shifted and crumbled around him. For a moment he was stuck, earth pressing on his chest, darkness absolute, panic rising. Then he pulled harder and broke through into open tunnel on the other side. Rodriguez and Kowalski followed. They stood in a tunnel section that felt different, older. The walls were reinforced with bamboo instead of wood. The ceiling was higher, and the air smelled different, drier. less used, as if this section had been sealed off for years. Chen's compass was spinning wildly. They were right on top of whatever was generating the field. The tunnel ended in a chamber, larger than the others. And inside, revealed by their flashlight beams, was something none of them expected. A truck. A Soviet-made GAZ-51, but not on the surface. Underground, buried in the earth, partially disassembled. And inside the truck bed, carefully packed, were crates. Rodriguez approached cautiously, opened one crate, stared. Mother of God. Inside were weapons, but not rifles or ammunition. Mortars, heavy machine guns, anti-aircraft guns, disassembled, packed, preserved. Military hardware, Soviet-made, serious equipment, enough to arm a battalion. Kowalski opened another crate. Documents, files, maps. He pulled one out carefully. The paper was old, yellowed, marked with Vietnamese and Chinese characters. This isn't new. This stuff's been here for years. Chen looked around the chamber, saw more crates, dozens of them, stacked, hidden, preserved underground. This is a cache, he said quietly. A major cache. They built the entire tunnel network around this. To hide it, protect it, keep it secret. But why? Rodriguez asked. Why not use it? Maybe it's strategic reserve, Kowalski said. For later, for a big offensive. Chen's mind was working through the implications. The tunnel network wasn't just defensive. It was logistical. The VC had been building this for years, since before American escalation, maybe since the French War, creating underground infrastructure to store supplies, hide troops, and wait for the right moment, the right battle. This wasn't guerrilla warfare. This was long-term strategic planning, patient, methodical, and terrifyingly effective. We need to report this, Chen said. Command needs to see it. They marked the route, made their way back to the tunnels, emerged into daylight. Chen reported directly to the captain. Within hours, intelligence officers were underground, photographing everything, cataloging weapons, translating documents. The documents revealed the cache had been established in 1963, 2 years before major U.S. ground deployment. The VC had been preparing for this war before it even started. Over the following weeks, tunnel networks were discovered across Siyu-Chi district. Miles of tunnels, multiple caches, entire underground cities. The Americans began operations to clear them, sealing entrances, destroying supplies, collapsing tunnels. But it was like fighting shadows. For every tunnel destroyed, the VC dug another. They'd been doing this for years. They'd keep doing it for years more. Chen's compass had revealed something larger than a tunnel. It had revealed a strategy, a mindset, an enemy that thought in decades, not months. The discovery at Siyu-Chi changed American understanding of the Vietnam War. Before Chen's compass led him underground, commanders had assumed they were fighting a guerrilla insurgency, hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, small unit tactics. After Siyu-Chi, they realized they were fighting something far more organized. The Viet Cong weren't scattered bands hiding in jungle. They were a structured military force with sophisticated infrastructure, long-term planning, and resources carefully protected underground. But changing understanding didn't change the war. The tunnels continued, despite aggressive clearing operations, pumping tear gas into entrances, sealing passages with explosives, sending tunnel rats into the darkness. The networks persisted. The VC simply dug deeper, built more, expanded. By 1968, intelligence estimated there were over 200 miles of tunnels in the Siyu-Chi region alone. A vast, hidden world beneath the jungle where an entire army could live, fight, and wait. William Chen spent the rest of his tour working on tunnel operations. His compass trick became legend. Other units requested his assistance. He'd arrive at cleared areas, take compass readings, and inevitably find hidden entrances intelligence had missed. He developed a reputation, the engineer who could see underground. Some soldiers thought he was lucky. Some thought he had a gift. Chen knew better. He just paid attention to what the instruments were telling him. He listened to the data, instead of assumptions. But the work took its toll. Going underground wasn't like combat on the surface. It was something darker, more primal. The tunnels were hot, cramped, pitch black. You couldn't stand, could barely crawl, and you never knew what was ahead. Booby traps, scorpions, snakes, or enemy soldiers waiting in the darkness with knives. Tunnel fighting was intimate and terrifying. Chen saw men break from it, saw soldiers refuse to go down after their first time, saw others become addicted to it, volunteers who went down again and again, drawn to the adrenaline and fear. Chen fell somewhere in between. He didn't love the tunnels, but he understood them, understood the engineering, the logic, the purpose. He respected the enemy's skill. The VC had created something remarkable. Not morally. War itself was never remarkable in any good sense, but technically, the tunnels represented human determination at its absolute limit. The determination to survive, to resist, to fight despite overwhelming odds. Chen could hate the war and still acknowledge that. In April 1968, Chen's tour ended. He rotated home, back to San Francisco, back to a country that was tearing itself apart over the war he'd just left. Protests, riots, political chaos. The America he returned to didn't want to hear about tunnels or compasses or enemy strategy. They wanted the war to end, wanted the soldiers to come home, wanted to forget the whole thing. Chen didn't talk about it, didn't tell stories at parties, didn't explain what he'd done. When people asked about Vietnam, he'd say, "I was an engineer, cleared roads, checked bridges." That was technically true, and it was enough to end most conversations. The compass, the tunnels, the underground cities, those stayed private. Memories he filed away and tried not to revisit. He went back to Berkeley, finished his degree, got a job with a civil engineering firm in Oakland, got married, had children, built a normal, quiet life. And on the surface, it worked. He was successful, stable. But sometimes at night, he'd wake from dreams of darkness, an earth pressing in, an air that tasted of soil. He'd lie awake, remembering the tunnels, remembering the chamber with the weapons cache, remembering his compass spinning wildly, pointing at secrets buried underground. His wife asked once, "Do you think about it? The war?" "Sometimes," Chen admitted. "Do you want to talk about it?" No. And that was true. He didn't want to talk. But he did think about the VC soldiers who'd built those tunnels, about their patience, their commitment, about what it takes to dig miles of tunnels by hand, to live underground for months or years, to fight a war from beneath the earth, about the determination required, the sacrifice, the absolute refusal to surrender no matter how overwhelming the enemy. The Americans had won individual battles, killed more enemy soldiers, controlled more territory, but they'd lost the war. Chen understood why. You can't defeat people willing to live underground. Can't break people who measure victory in decades instead of months. Can't win when the enemy's entire strategy is survival. Just survive, just keep existing, and eventually the other side will leave. That's what the tunnels represented. Not military brilliance, not tactical superiority, just a raw, stubborn refusal to be erased. In 1989, Chen visited Vietnam for the first time since the war. Tourism was opening up. The country was healing. He flew to Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, and hired a guide to take him to Siu Chi. The tunnels were a tourist attraction now. Preserved sections where visitors could crawl through sanitized passages and see reconstructed chambers. The reality was packaged for cameras and tour groups. But Chen didn't want the tour. He wanted to see the real tunnels, the ones still sealed, still hidden. The guide, an older Vietnamese man who'd fought in the war, understood. "You were here before," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." "What unit?" 25th Infantry. "Engineer." The guide nodded. "You fought against the tunnels." "Yes." "Come, I'll show you something." They walked into the jungle, away from the tourist areas. The guide led him to a spot that looked like any other section of forest. Knelt down, brushed away leaves, revealed a hatch, rusted, old, sealed with a new lock. Still here, the guide said, still beneath us. Miles of them. Some collapsed, some preserved, some forgotten, but still here. He looked at Chen. You cannot destroy what lives underground. We knew that. That's why we won. Chen stared at the hatch, remembered his compass spinning, remembered descending into darkness, remembered the weapon cache and the patience it represented. I found tunnels, he said quietly, with a broken compass. Led me straight to them. The guide smiled. Not broken. Working. Just pointing at truth instead of north. Chen thought about that statement for years afterward. Truth instead of north. His compass hadn't malfunctioned. It had revealed something real, something hidden, something everyone else was missing. The metal underground, the tunnels, the infrastructure of a war being fought in 3 dimensions while American forces thought in 2. That's what bothered him most. Not the discovery itself, but how close they had come to never discovering it at all. If he hadn't checked his compass that day, if the lieutenant had refused his request, if the captain had said no, the tunnels would have remained hidden, the weapon caches undiscovered, the entire strategic picture wrong, and men would have kept dying without understanding why. After Chen returned from that 1989 visit, he started writing, not a memoir. He didn't want to tell his own story, but a technical analysis, a paper on the CU tunnels as an engineering achievement, the mathematics of their construction, the logistics of underground warfare, the strategic implications of 3-dimensional battlefield space. He submitted it to military journals. Some published it. Officers at West Point and Annapolis started using it as a case study because the lesson wasn't specific to Vietnam. It was universal. War is fought where you don't expect it, in dimensions you don't see, by methods you don't anticipate. The side that understands this, that thinks creatively about space and strategy and patience, has an enormous advantage. The VC understood. They went underground, literally, and that single decision changed everything. Chen's paper caught the attention of military historians. They interviewed him, asked detailed questions about the compass, the tunnels, the discovery process. And through those conversations, Chen realized something important. His story wasn't about him. It was about paying attention, about trusting instruments over assumptions, about following evidence even when it contradicts orders or intelligence or common sense. The compass was pointing at something real, he told one historian. But no one wanted to believe it because intelligence said the area was clear, because we'd swept it before, because it didn't fit our understanding. So I could have ignored it, should have, maybe by military logic, but I didn't, and that made the difference. What made you follow it? The historian asked. Chen thought carefully. Because instruments don't lie. People lie. Orders lie. Intelligence lies, not intentionally, but because it's incomplete or wrong or outdated. But a compass just responds to magnetic fields. It doesn't have opinions or assumptions. So when it pointed at empty jungle, I had to assume the jungle wasn't empty. I had to trust the instrument over my eyes. That became the core of his teaching. After retiring from engineering in 2001, Chen taught at UC Berkeley, same school where he'd been a student 40 years earlier. He taught civil engineering, but his most popular class was about Vietnam, about the tunnels, about the strategic and engineering lessons. Students packed the lectures, not for war stories. Chen didn't tell those, but for the analysis, for the calm, careful breakdown of how the VC achieved what they achieved. One student asked, "Do you think we could have won if we'd understood the tunnels earlier?" Chen shook his head. Winning was never about understanding tunnels. It was about understanding commitment. The VC were willing to live underground for years, to die in those tunnels, to sacrifice everything. We weren't. We were counting down days until rotation home. That's the fundamental difference. You can't defeat people who are willing to pay any price when you're only willing to pay some prices. Another student. Do you think about the VC soldiers? The ones in the tunnels you discovered? Every day, Chen admitted, I wonder if they survived. If they're alive now. Old men like me. I wonder if they know an American engineer with a broken compass found their cache. I wonder what they'd think of me. What do you think they'd think? Chen smiled slightly. Probably that I was lucky, or that their camouflage wasn't good enough, or that fate works in strange ways. But I also think they'd understand. We were both doing our jobs, both trying to survive, both following orders in a war neither of us started. That's not friendship, but it's something. Recognition, maybe respect. In 2015, now 74 years old, Chen made one final trip to Vietnam, this time with a documentary film crew. They were making a program about the Siu Chi tunnels. Wanted his perspective. Wanted to film him returning to the site where his compass had led him 50 years earlier. The jungle had reclaimed most of it. The original hatch was gone, location unmarked. But Chen stood in approximately the right spot, held his old compass, the same one, kept all these years. The needle pointed north now. Steady, reliable, nothing underground anymore to disturb it. The interviewer asked, "What do you feel being back here?" Chen looked around, at the jungle, at the sky, at the earth beneath his feet. "I feel like I understood something important here. Not about war. War is just waste and death. But about human capability. About what people can do when survival depends on it. The VC dug this network by hand, lived in darkness, endured bombing and gas and tunnel rats. And they survived, not because they were superhuman, but because they committed absolutely to survival. That's the lesson. Not about winning or losing, but about commitment, about refusing to quit. And the compass, the interviewer asked, do you think it was fate, luck, divine intervention? Chen smiled. I think it was physics, magnetic fields and metal underground. But I also think sometimes physics points us toward things we need to discover. My compass was working perfectly. It was pointing at truth, and I was just paying attention. The camera crew filmed him standing there, holding his compass, old man now, remembering. When they finished, Chen walked into the jungle, found a spot near where the hatch had been, and quietly, in Vietnamese he learned over the years, he said, "Thank you for teaching me." Teaching him what? That winning isn't the only measure. That the war you think you're fighting might not be the war actually happening. That truth hides underground sometimes, and only those willing to look will find it. William Chen died in 2019 at 78 years old. Heart failure. Quiet end. His obituary in the San Francisco Chronicle mentioned his engineering career, his teaching, his military service, and one line about discovering tunnel networks in Vietnam using compass navigation. The detail felt small, almost trivial, but to those who knew the story, it represented something profound, because Chen's compass didn't just find tunnels. It revealed a mindset, a way of seeing the world that trusts evidence over expectation, that follows data even when it contradicts authority, that believes instruments pointing at impossible things might be pointing at truths you haven't discovered yet. That's rare. In war, in science, in life, most people, when reality contradicts their worldview, reject reality. Chen rejected his worldview and followed his compass. The tunnels of Siu Chi still exist. Some are tourist attractions. Others remain sealed, hidden, forgotten beneath the jungle. The weapons cache Chen discovered was cataloged, documented, eventually destroyed. But the idea behind it, the patient, methodical preparation for a war survival, that remains. It's studied in military academies, taught in strategic planning courses, analyzed by historians trying to understand how a poor nation defeated the world's most powerful military. And the answer always comes back to commitment, to time horizon, to willingness to suffer. The VC fought a 20-year war underground, 20 years of darkness, hunger, disease, death. And they won, not through superior weapons or tactics or leadership, through superior commitment, through the absolute refusal to quit. The tunnels were proof of that commitment. Physical manifestation of determination measured in decades. Chen understood that, respected it. Even while fighting against it, he respected it. And that respect informed everything he taught afterward. War isn't about courage or honor or glory. It's about commitment and cost. about what you're willing to sacrifice and for how long. The side willing to pay more for longer usually wins. Everything else is just details. Today, engineers and military officers still study the Siuchi tunnels, still learn from them, still ask the same questions Chen asked. How did we miss this? How did we walk over miles of tunnels without knowing? How did our intelligence fail so completely? And the answer is always the same, because we were looking for what we expected to see, not what was actually there. Chen's compass pointed at what was actually there, beneath the surface, hidden, waiting to be discovered. And because one engineer trusted his instrument over his orders, over intelligence reports, over common sense, he found truth underground, found an entire war being fought in darkness, while everyone above assumed victory was simple and close. That's the real lesson. Not about tunnels or compasses, or Vietnam specifically, but about reality hiding in dimensions we don't think to check. About truth waiting beneath the surface. About paying attention to instruments that point at impossible things. Because sometimes impossible is just the truth you haven't discovered yet. The compass wasn't broken. It was working perfectly. It just wasn't pointing at what everyone expected. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. Subscribe for more stories like this.